Hi, Jim Salmons here. You know, we do a lot of live bait fishing off of our kayak. So today I'm going to cover some techniques and equipment you want for catching your live bait, and then how I tend to rig a live bait when I'm trolling. First off, of course, you have to find the live bait, and you're going to use several things to do that. You're going to look for birds working the surface, for baits that's being pushed up. You're going to look for puddling bait. You'll look for bait just swimming just along the surface. Also having a fish finder like the Raymarine Dragonfly, where you can meter the schools, because the bait may be up at the top, it may be all the way down at the bottom. So having a fish finder on your kayak is really going to be a huge asset in locating the bait. The other thing I always do is if I'm not seeing bait and I'm paddling around looking for bait, I always troll. I will always troll my bait catcher, because that can be one of the best ways to pick up some of those bigger greenback mackerel or bonita. So, you know, you're using those three techniques: visually with your eyes, visually with the fish finder, and then trolling. Probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they're out there catching live bait is using too light of gear. You know, you don't need super heavy gear, but you're also not, as I always say, you're not sport fishing for bait. You know, you don't want to fight your bait. You want to hook it and you want to wind it in. So you want to have a rod that's nice and stiff. I mean, I usually say like a decent freshwater bass rod or saltwater bass rod is a nice setup for catching bait. Because if you get 4 or 5 baits on and you're using a noodle of a rod, those bait, you're fighting them, and those bait are swimming around like crazy, and all you're doing down there is macrame. And for those of us who are old enough to know what macrame is, it basically means you got a big knot. And when you have multiple hooks and they're all swimming around, it's a knot you're not gonna get out. So, you know, you chuck that live bait sabiki rig and you start over. So that is what a bait catcher is. It is called a sabiki for the most part, or just they'll call them just a bait catcher. Some people remember them as Lucky Joes and that sort of thing. But basically they're a multi-hook setup, if you can see this, anywhere from 4 to 6 hooks. I like 4 hooks. If you get more than 4, again, you get multiple baits on there, it can just be a nightmare. And they come pre-packaged, like, well, here's a bigger one from Mustad, and they pull right out of the packaging. Very, very simple to set up. They have a swivel on each end, or a snap swivel on one end, tie it onto your main line, put a sinker on the other end of the line. So besides having the right size rod and reel, something you can just wind on these things, you want to make sure you got a decent weight. If you use really lightweight, when those bait hit it, again, there's no tension on the end, and they're more likely to tangle up your bait catcher. So I usually go with about a 3-ounce sinker on the end of my bait catcher. So let's say you have located a school of bait on your fish finder. It's very simple. What I do is I will drop the weight and do basically a stop and go, stop and go. So drop for a few seconds, stop it. Drop for a few seconds, stop it. Drop it for a few seconds, stop it. And you'll actually, a lot of times with a good finder like the Dragonflies, you can actually watch it go down, and you'll know when you're at the right level. If you don't have a fish finder, you just use this method until you start feeling that bite. Now, some people will tell you that when you feel that first bite, to just kind of let it stay down there, because once one gets activated, the other ones get activated. Yes, that is true. But if you leave it down there slack and one is hitting it, again, you end up with that big knot. So what I do, as soon as I feel that first bait hit, I start winding it up. And the others, if they want, they will follow it up, and you'll get multiple baits on your bait catcher. It's not a pump and wind. And again, this is why you want decent size gear. It's just a nice, steady wind. You don't want to pump it. You don't want to rip it too fast, because then you're just going to rip the hook out of the bait's mouth. So nice, steady wind. Bring it up onto your kayak and control it. You need to control it. So what I do is I swing this thing up here, if you can see this, and I will grab the sinker. I will lay it down in my kayak, and then one by one, take the baits off of the little hook. Now these little hooks are very, very sharp, and a day of bait catching usually involves getting at least one hook in your hand. It's just something you have to deal with. But you want to be careful. So by controlling that sinker, I can keep this semi-taut, and then these are dancing around here. You can see that these flies are off of a tag end, off of the side of the line. I will grab the line between my fingers, kind of hold it like this, and then reach down and grab the bait. Undo it, then slowly work my hand up to the next one. And then slowly work your hand up. You want to avoid getting hooked in the hand. This is what I like to use. I use a basic old bass rod for catching my bait. Some people prefer using what's called a sabiki rod. And you can see this rod here. It has no eyes on it. There's no guides. So the line actually gets sucked up inside the rod, pulling these sabiki hooks into the rod, and keeps them nice and clear. So you have this on your kayak rather than these floating hooks. So this is a little bit better way if you want to avoid tangles. I again prefer just using the old bass rod. I have better sensitivity. I feel the bites better with this, but this eliminates a lot of hassles. So you got to kind of balance out which one's going to work best for you. Sabikis come in a variety of sizes and a variety of line weights. I generally like to have, and this is for offshore fishing where we're catching mackerel, maybe bonita, I like to have a main line on the sabiki of about 30 pounds, and then the tag line, which is what the hook is attached to, around 20. If you go too light and you get bonita or bigger mackerel, they will just break your hooks off. So I like that setup. Generally speaking, I'm going with like a number 8 size hook on these, but you need to adjust it. They come in every size hook. So you adjust it based on the size of bait you may be catching. This is more the size I would be using if I'm going for bonita, and this is the size I'm using if I'm going for small greenback mackerel. Of course, you're catching live bait, you have to have a way to keep it. On kayaks like the Kraken, we have a really easy way to set up a bait tank. And you know, I've been putting bait tanks on kayaks for a long time, so you can either get a manufactured one now or you can build one yourself. Some guys will just use what's called a bait tube, which is a big piece of PVC with holes in it. You drag it behind your kayak. Problem with those is, you know, you're dragging something. And I would rather carry 4 gallons of water on the back of my kayak than drag one. So you need to have some way to carry that live bait. That's always really important. So you've got your live bait. We do a lot of trolling here. I do a lot of trolling in general, whether it's offshore for tuna or here at home for yellowtail. So I'm just gonna show you 2 ways that I will hook my live baits. And I'm gonna use this, this live bait here. I like to have different depths at which I troll my live bait. And there's different ways I can hook the bait to make it swim high or swim low. So if I'm going to have my one bait, and I generally will troll 2 baits, so I will have one high, one low. For the high bait, I like to pin them through the nose, and that is sideways through the nose, not upwards through the nose, not coming out of the mouth. If you do it through the mouth, you're forcing their mouth to stay open, and you can actually drown your bait. So sideways through the nose, they have like a small nasal port, and it's very simple. It goes in nice and shallow. It doesn't hurt the bait at all. And when I'm doing this, I usually prefer to use a smaller J hook like I'm using here. The circle hooks sometimes, because of the curve, they will rotate and get caught in the side of the bait's head. This tends to stay a little bit straighter. So sideways through the nose, again, not through the eye, not through the brain, not up through the mouth, just sideways through the nose. Your bait will live really well this way, particularly like a greenback mackerel or a caballito or goggle eye. Sideways through the nose works very, very well. The next way I use a little bit bigger hook. And again, you have to kind of match it to the size of your bait because you want some hook exposure off the side of the bait. So if I want my bait to swim down a little bit deeper, I'll use a little bit bigger circle hook, and I will go just under the flesh, even with the top of the gill plates, like so. And I'm usually using a big circle hook for this because you need that width. You need a fish that comes in, it's gonna grab that hook. If your hook is too small, it'll bite the bait and then the whole thing will go through its mouth, back out of its mouth without ever catching that hook. So having a circle hook that's just wide enough that it's past the sides of the bait. And you just go just into the flesh. Don't go so deep that you're putting it into its spine or anything like that, because then you're just going to kill it. The beauty of putting them on in the back of the head like this, they never spin on you and they live a really long time. So just comparatively speaking, through the nose of the bait is pulling him this way and he stays up high. Pinning them through the back of their head, your line's like this, and so the bait tends to want to swim down. So you'll get more depth on your bait without ever actually adding weight to it. When you're trolling from this method, you want to make sure that you're not going too fast. Because if you go fast, you're just pulling the bait like this. You want to paddle, stop, let him swim down, paddle, stop, let him swim down. So it's a nice, easy pace. Generally speaking anyway, when I tell people how fast we go when we're trolling a live bait, you really can't go too slow as long as your bait's not passing you. You know, you want to be going at a nice, easy pace that keeps that bait, a little bit of tension on the line, and just keeps that bait straight back behind you. So there's two different methods to pin on your bait that I use when I'm trolling live bait. If you have any more questions about live bait fishing from your kayak, please put them in the comments section down below. I'll be happy to answer all your questions. Give us a thumbs up if you like your video, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Kayak Fishing Tales.